The 2023 NFL season has shown us a lot about the starting quarterbacks in the NFL. Today, I'm going to be going through pretty much every relevant quarterback in the league and show you where I have them ranked so far. This will take into account their careers, what they've done, but also how they've played this season as well. Let's dive into it. We've got, a couple of categories here. We've got 7 of them: elite franchise quarterbacks, good starters, mediocre replacement level players, inconsistent quarterbacks, low-end starters, and true backup types. Let's dive in here. We have Josh Allen to start out, and Josh Allen's still in the elite tier. He does have a lot of turnover-worthy plays. He does put the ball in harm's way too often. We've seen that this year as well as last year, but at the end of the day, his rushing ability with just his pure physical talent, his arm, and everything that he can do still makes him an elite level quarterback. It really would take long stretches of inconsistent bad quarterback play, which I think there's certainly been games here and there, but as a whole, Josh Allen is still an elite level quarterback. He certainly is still going to be in that tier. Baker Mayfield has been kind of all over the place on these lists for a while. Going to put him in the inconsistent tier. I just think that when he's really on his game and he's got that Baker swagger, that confidence, he can be a really solid quarterback. He's done some really good things for the Bucs this year, but, just need to put it together on a more consistent basis. Even on the Buccaneers this year, I think they're more predominantly winning because of their defense. He doesn't have a good running game to work with, so, he does have to kind of take control of the offense, and he can do it at times, but there's just not a lot of consistency when it comes to Baker Mayfield at the quarterback position. Then we have Joe Burrow. I definitely think he's still in the elite tier as well. This will be ranked pretty much within the tiers as well. I do still have Burrow over Allen just because the general consistency. He has been injured to start this year, and I certainly think that comes into play. But his anticipation, his timing, his playmaking when things break down, I think are really starting to show once again. And he may not have the best stats this year, but I think over the course of the past couple of seasons, he's certainly proven to be an elite level quarterback, and he's still firmly within that elite tier. For Derek Carr next, my opinion has kind of waned on Derek Carr. I think he's a pretty mediocre replacement level quarterback at this point. I don't think he's really been exactly what the Saints have wanted. He just doesn't do a good job of pushing the ball downfield, being able to create out of structure. He's perfectly fine within the structure of the offense. When his first read is there, he's accurate, he's on time. There's some really good things about Derek Carr, but just his overall lack of ability to be an elevator and really be the reason that his teams are successful. There's a reason Vegas wanted to move on, and I just think that there's nothing wrong with him being your starting quarterback, but you're definitely not super comfortable. You're certainly not convinced that you have that guy that can lead you to true postseason success. Then Josh Dobbs, and I've got to give Josh Dobbs credit. I still don't think he's an overly great quarterback. I still have him in the low-end starter tier, but he's played fairly well for the Cardinals. They haven't won a lot of games, but he hasn't been a completely debilitating factor on this offense, which I thought he might be, being that he was the third stringer on Cleveland coming into the season. And I do think that he's done some nice things here and there. He's got decent physical tools. He's got a little bit of running ability, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with Josh Dobbs being a really high-end backup quarterback for you, or a bridge quarterback, and that's kind of what he is until Kyler Murray can get back or they draft somebody. And I think he's a fine player. He doesn't have a lot to work with in Arizona, and he's kind of taken the most of the opportunity and been just a decent player this year. Then we have Matt Corral. He's a true backup, just really not somebody that has had a chance. Then we have Dak Prescott. Going to put him in the good starter tier. I still think that Dak does have some limitations. There are some things that I do think makes him a little bit better than somebody like, say, Derek Carr, where he does have a little bit more playmaking ability. He's a little bit more accurate. I still think that he can put the ball in harm's way. I do think that he's still not a true elevator necessarily all the time. And he's somebody that has been the quarterback of this team pretty much since day one and done a really solid job. He can get the job done. I think that with a good team around him, he's proven to be a very successful quarterback. Just not sure that he's really that true franchise level elevator type of quarterback. Then we have Andy Dalton. He's a low-end starter. I think that there really isn't anything wrong with Andy Dalton starting for you. He's very, very high-end backup or a low-end starter, once again, kind of a bridge quarterback. And I do think that, in general, he is kind of that ideal number 2 quarterback where he can come in, keep your season afloat, be a pretty decent player. He can be that veteran option if you have a young quarterback as well. So he still certainly has a role in the NFL. It's just a little bit less defined than it was when he was with the Bengals. Then Sam Darnold, certainly think he's a backup type at this point as well. Daniel Jones has been very up and down. I'm going to put him in the mediocre and replacement level category. I don't think that Daniel Jones is given enough credit sometimes for a lot of the things that he's able to do, running around, making plays with his legs, giving guys chances. But there's also plenty of situations where Daniel Jones is the problem. He holds onto the ball too long. He's not accurate enough. He's not really creating plays. And so I think that it goes both ways with him being a very highly paid quarterback now after the extension this offseason. I think the Giants certainly were hoping for a lot more. They've kind of regressed as a whole, but definitely hasn't propelled himself anywhere near that good starter tier. Certainly think he's a lot more close to the inconsistent or low-end starter tier than anything else. Definitely hasn't been a great season for Jones up to this point. Then we have Justin Fields, and he is kind of the definition of inconsistent. His flashes are awesome, but the Bears have pretty much killed every ounce of confidence that he has. Tyson Bagent, an undrafted free agent, just came in and pretty much played better than Justin Fields within an offense that just doesn't play to Justin's strengths at all. I think there's a pretty good chance the Bears move on from Fields after this year, and I would really like to see Fields in an offense that actually caters to his strengths and builds around him. There's a very good chance he doesn't go into next season it's the unquestioned starter on a team, whether it's the Bears or another team, but I think that within the right system, he could still be a dangerous quarterback. He just needs to get his confidence back first and foremost. He's just way too inconsistent. He's not reading the field. He's not anticipating, but he's just lost all confidence in what he's seeing, and they're really just not using his legs as much this year as well. Geno Smith, I think, is a good starter. Some of the inconsistencies have shown up a little bit more this season. He's putting the ball in harm's way a little bit more. He's a little bit more inconsistent than he was last year, but still, I think the floor that he has is a really solid starting quarterback in the NFL, and that's super exciting, that he's turned into that kind of player at, in his 30s, and that's really impressive. You don't see that super often, and he's just kind of taken that leap of being a really solid quarterback that he's not necessarily going to be the main catalyst for you winning games, but he can put together some really nice plays and really be a reason that your team wins. Maybe not the reason, but he certainly helps. He has great wide receivers, and he's able to take advantage and be a really solid player for the Seahawks offense. So definitely liked what I've seen from him. Jared Goff as a whole this year has been one of the most effective and efficient starters in the entire NFL. You could certainly make the case based on what he's shown this year, besides the Ravens game this past week where he looked pretty terrible, that he's a franchise quarterback. And I think there's a lot of discourse on Jared Goff because, for the longest time, he wasn't living up to that number 1 overall pick. And Sean McVay couldn't, get the most out of him, even though they went to a Super Bowl and they gave up on him and upgraded for Matthew Stafford. And I think a lot got lost in that Jared Goff is still a pretty solid quarterback. And this year, with Ben Johnson and some interesting weapons, just great play calling, a great offensive line, able to rely on the run game, use play action. Goff has been so efficient. He's been really good on third downs, especially pushing the ball, being efficient, and I definitely think he has definitely separated himself from that mediocre replacement level starter tier. I think he's even in the conversation for a top 10 quarterback right now. He's right on the cusp for me. He's number 11. So I definitely think that Goff is playing super well right now. Definitely has brought his stock up a long way from just a few years ago. Definitely think that he is underrated by a lot of people. Taylor Heinicke, just a backup quarterback at this point. Justin Herbert, I think, is not in that elite tier right now. I think that he's just making too many mistakes, and he's just not able to get it done when it really matters too often. And that's not fully his fault. His defense is inconsistent. It's just, I feel like every time I watch Justin Herbert in a close game, there's just a crucial mistake at the end of the game where he's forcing it and he's not able to make that play. And I do think that some of the stuff out of structure, just when pressure comes in his face, and his ability to really manipulate the pocket and be a true, just dynamic, elite level quarterback, isn't just, the very top tier. Now, I have him as my 5th overall quarterback. I think he's the best in this franchise quarterback tier. There's absolutely not to say that Justin Herbert is not a good quarterback. He absolutely is. I just think that there are 4 quarterbacks that have proven just a little bit more consistently that they're perhaps just that tier above. And Justin Herbert, he just needs to put things together, especially down the stretch in games, and he needs to put together winning seasons. At some point, wins are not a quarterback stat, but you have simply got to have some success, and Herbert is just going to be in that franchise QB tier for now. We have Hendon Hooker, haven't seen any of him. He's in that backup tier. Sam Howell, on a ridiculous pace when it comes to sacks, and he's just so incredibly frustrating to watch because you see some of the traits. He's got a pretty decent arm. He can throw it into tight windows. He's got velocity. He's got some movement. He can manipulate the pocket a little bit, but just his inability to really kind of understand when the defense is closing down on him, when he has to get rid of the ball, how much time he has in the pocket, and being able to balance that with his playmaking ability, which is what makes him an interesting quarterback. I definitely think you could put him in the inconsistent tier, but for right now, I am going to put him in that low-end starter tier. He has the talent to theoretically get out of it, but just pocket presence and the ability to understand pressure and how to escape and be able to create plays, I think is such a crucial trait in a quarterback, and I think Hal has kind of failed miserably at that. He's still super young. This is his first season starting, and definitely has plenty of time to elevate himself and become a really solid quarterback. But I do think that could be the fatal flaw for him. He's just on a historic pace, and it's not that the Commanders' offensive line is good, but they're certainly not the main reason behind it. Sacks can be a quarterback stat too, and they're a big Sam Howell stat right now. Next, we have Jalen Hurts. Think he is solidly in that franchise quarterback tier. Think he has done a really good job kind of continuing to play well after losing Shane Steichen and some of the keys to that offense that really made them successful last year. They still have a very efficient offense. He's maybe not hitting the deep ball as consistently as he was last year, and he's putting the ball in harm's way a lot more than he was last year. And so I definitely think that regression was expected a little bit, but he's still playing very well, and that's awesome to see. I didn't expect him to have like a huge regression by any means, but I still think he is very solidly a franchise quarterback, somebody you can build around and somebody you can win because of. He's just maybe a step below some of those other really, really elite guys, but I love what Hurts has done over the past couple of years. You got to give him ridiculous amounts of credit for the steps he has taken to get better ever since his time back at Alabama. And, I really respect what Jalen Hurts has done, carving out himself an awesome NFL career. Then we have Jimmy G. He is pretty much the definition of mediocre and replacement level. When he's healthy, he's perfectly fine. He can throw with anticipation and accuracy. He's not really much of a playmaker outside of structure. He's not really great at manipulating the pocket. He'll have way too many throws that are like, what are you doing, Jimmy? But he is a perfectly fine player. There's nothing wrong with him. Health is honestly the biggest detractor from his success, and I think Jimmy Garoppolo is pretty much the new Andy Dalton line, where if you've got somebody better than Jimmy Garoppolo, you can at least convince yourself that you have a franchise quarterback. If you have somebody worse than him, you probably don't. And so I think that's a very interesting line to kind of take a look at. We now have Kirk Cousins. I think he's very solidly a good starter. He is not the flashiest player. He's not somebody that, is the most consistent either. He's a little bit week to week, where 1 week he'll throw for 350 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, look really great. And then he'll have an absolute stinker on primetime football where everybody sees him and they think he's automatically a terrible quarterback. And I definitely think that's not the case. The Vikings haven't been particularly good this year, and I do think they will move on from Kirk Cousins likely at the end of this season based on just the contract and the timing of everything as well with his age. But I think he's still a very solid, good starting quarterback. Having no Justin Jefferson certainly hurts, and the Vikings are not having the season that they would have hoped for. But I still think that, when you look at him in a vacuum, he's an accurate quarterback with great anticipation. He's a good leader and can do a lot of the things that you want your franchise quarterback to do. Next, we have Kyler Murray. Haven't seen a lot of him in a long time, but I still think that he has a lot of talent. You certainly have plenty of question marks, and I don't know that he's going to be the Cardinals quarterback next year, just with the contract and the fact that they could bring in a new coaching staff. There's plenty of change within the Cardinals organization, but I still think Kyler Murray is an electric playmaker. He can do a lot of things that just a lot of other quarterbacks can't, and that's what makes him a good starter in my mind, is he does have that playmaking ability. I do think that he can be a runner. I do think he can be somebody that throws the deep ball really effectively. He has good velocity. He's not the most consistent over the middle of the field, which is expected for a shorter quarterback, but I definitely think that he has his strong points, and he definitely has flashes of being a really, really good quarterback. It's just about getting on the field, getting healthy, being consistent. That would really propel Kyler Murray perhaps even up the board further. Lamar Jackson, as a Bengals fan, certainly I think that Lamar Jackson deserves a lot more credit than he gets. This season alone, he has probably been the best quarterback in the NFL, and he is playing better than his MVP season. And it's a very different type of play because he's not running as much. He's winning more from the pocket. His wide receivers definitely are not helping him out, but this guy is absolutely playing some of his best football of his career after signing that extension. He deserves all the credit that he gets and more, because right now he is playing like potentially the best quarterback in the NFL. He's firmly in that elite tier for me and has just been playing so well. So I definitely think Lamar Jackson deserves a lot of credit. Right now, he is one of the best in the NFL. He has that rushing threat, but he's winning within the pocket within this new offense, and I think that is huge for the Ravens and this team's success. Next, we have Will Levis. He's just a backup right now. We don't know what he is. He could certainly be a lot more, but you just don't know what he is at this point. Jordan Love, also the definition of inconsistent, kind of along with Justin Fields here. I think that Love has shown a little bit more kind of within the pocket as a processor. His velocity is really impressive. His ability to win at the medium level, I think, has been really interesting as well. It's just about the consistent placement, the ability to read defenses, go through his progression, know where he's looking, and get it there on time and on target. He isn't really proven to be the best decision maker right now, and he doesn't help that he has pretty terrible weapons. So I think that Love does need some guys around him to really kind of showcase his talent. He has not looked particularly great, but he has certainly shown flashes as well. So very interested to see kind of where Jordan Love ends up on this list by the end of the season. Obviously, his first real season as a starter, midseason. I think there's been a lot of up and downs, which is to be expected, but perhaps a little bit more downs than you would have liked at this point. Mac Jones also incredibly inconsistent right now. He just has way too much volatility for a quarterback that really doesn't give you those high upside traits. Unlike some of the other kind of statue quarterbacks and things like that, he does have some ability to manipulate the pocket. He's willing to go downfield. I don't think he's much of a playmaker when the play breaks down. I don't think he's somebody that really has elite physical tools or velocity or anything that really makes him special. And just over the past couple of years, the lack of good offensive play calling has really made him look like an incredibly inconsistent quarterback. I just am not confident that he's going to be a high-end starter. He's been benched multiple times this season by Bill Belichick, and you have to wonder if he is kind of losing his time here in New England and if that time might be cut short relatively soon. Then we have Patrick Mahomes, obviously number one in the NFL. He's great, and absolutely everybody knows that he just does things that nobody else can. He's a magician when things break down. I think his running ability is incredibly underrated just as a scrambler, and he is the best quarterback in the NFL. It's indisputable, and right now, I think you could certainly make the case that he is on pace to be the best quarterback of all time. So you gotta just respect what Mahomes does, and he is certainly and clearly number one on this list. Matt Ryan is retired. He's a backup. And Davis Mills is also a backup, not very good. Then we have Kenny Pickett, which is an interesting conversation as well. This offense absolutely holds back what Kenny Pickett has done and what he can be, but I don't think he's taken that step by any stretch of the imagination. I think he's been really disappointing, and I think that right now you'd classify him as a low-end starter. He just hasn't taken that step of developing elite anticipation and timing. Pretty much his entire playbook, to me, it looks like is throw back shoulder balls to George Pickens. And it works because George Pickens can moss dudes. He has great connection with him, and that's been a successful combination. It's really hard to kind of decipher the difference between Matt Canada's horrible play calling and kind of the limiting factors of Kenny Pickett's game. But I just don't think that Pickett has shown to be anything more than a low-end starter at this point in Season 2. His offense is just really, really limiting for the Steelers team, and I think Pickett is kind of somewhat at the heart of that. Brock Purdy up next. I think he's just a really good starting quarterback. He operates probably the easiest offense in the NFL really effectively. If you want to see more of my thoughts on Brock Purdy, go ahead and check out my film breakdown on him. Leave that video link in the description. But Brock Purdy definitely has shown some really nice anticipation, accuracy, timing, the ability to really understand concepts, and he's really smart, know where to go with the ball and when. He has great playmakers and the best play caller in the NFL, so that certainly makes his job a little bit easier, but you got to give him a lot of credit. 7th round pick, carving out a role for himself and becoming a just super consistent starter. Definitely, that's a product of the 49ers having a great team, a great coaching staff, and a great system, but Purdy has also done really well within the system as well and deserves some credit. Anthony Richardson is done for the year. We just don't know a ton about him. He's in the inconsistent tier. A lot of these rookies are just going to be on that kind of level right now. I just think that he's shown so many good flashes, but you just can't make too many conclusions after like 3 or 4 games of him. So he's just going to go in that tier for now. Desmond Ridder has looked like a low-end starter. His running ability has been an underrated factor for this team. He's got, decent zip on the ball. He's got fine understanding of where to go with the ball, but his accuracy and his placement are just not good enough for the NFL right now. He's just not very consistent quarterback, and within a system that really works to shield a lot of his weaknesses and prevent him from going into true drop back passing situations, he's still really struggled, and I do think that Atlanta will be looking to upgrade that position. I think he could be a really solid backup quarterback for a long time, but just not sure he's cut out to be a true starter here. Aaron Rodgers, just a lot of uncertainty, obviously, with the Achilles. I still think he can be a franchise quarterback. Things looked really good in the preseason, and I had super high expectations and hopes for what this Jets team could look like. We'll see if he is able to come back from that Achilles injury. Certainly rumors that he might be back at some point this year, but excited to see what Rodgers could potentially do within that Jets system. Just way too many question marks to really move him too far up or down. Russell Wilson, going to put him in the mediocre replacement level tier. I've been hard on Russell Wilson for quite a while, and I do think that now at this point, he hasn't been able to figure it out with Sean Payton. He wasn't able to figure out with Hackett. This wide receiver room is, getting frustrated, Jerry Jeudy especially. I don't think that Russ is the sole reason for all of the issues on the Broncos, but he's certainly not a help. It is potentially going to be one of the worst trades moves for teams in quite a while, and I just don't think he's the same Russ that we saw in Seattle by any means. He's just not that kind of player anymore. He's just not able to create out of structure and really be able to win with his athleticism, which was just such a huge part of his game in Seattle, and I think he's realizing that, and he's not been terrible, to be honest, but I just think he's been very replacement level. Matthew Stafford up next. I think he's really shown great things when he's healthy and able to be a great quarterback, really, with players around him and a good coach in Sean McVay. Like, he's still a really good quarterback, regardless of his age. Coming back from injury, I had my concerns, but I think he's really kind of proven them wrong right now. Obviously, we're just a couple weeks into the season. There's plenty of time for him to get injured and things to kind of fall apart. But right now, based on how he's playing, he is still a franchise-level quarterback, been playing so well to this point, and really kind of excited to see what the Rams can continue to do. Then CJ Stroud, who has been just awesome as a rookie, and I'm already ready to put him in the good starter tier. What makes him good is really repeatable. It's really impressive. If you want to see breakdowns on CJ Stroud as well, check out my film breakdown on him. Just his connection with Nico Collins and his understanding of anticipation, where to go with the ball. He's just such an advanced player already in his rookie season. He just looks like a 10-year vet, somebody that knows what he's doing on the field. You really aren't going to rattle him too much and shake him. So I just think that Stroud is already within that tier and really, really impressed so far by him. Ryan Tannehill, he's pretty much just the mediocre replacement level guy that you all already think of. I think he's been particularly bad this year. He's just making poor decisions. He's not really a playmaker. They have nothing around him anymore, and they're going into looks like a full-blown fire sale. So I think Tannehill's time within Tennessee is certainly done. I think that Levis or Willis are definitely going to get a chance here, but I think he is still a fine quarterback. You're just not getting any kind of elevation of your offense through Ryan Tannehill. Next, Trevor Lawrence, and I'm going to put him in that franchise quarterback tier, and I am going to put him at number 6 here. I think that when he's on his game, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. He's already at that level going into year 3 and really has done a great job so far. I do think that he has put the ball in harm's way a little bit too often. I think there are still some inconsistencies that you wish you didn't have if you were Jacksonville, but those highs and some of the really impressive throws are definitely things that you look at and makes you really excited about this Jacksonville team and Trevor Lawrence as a whole. I really think that he has taken marvelous steps the past couple of years and has turned himself into a true franchise-level quarterback for this Jaguars team. Kyle Trask is a backup. He is absolutely trash. We have Trey Lance. He's a backup quarterback right now as well. We'll also just throw Carson Wentz in that tier here. And then we have some interesting conversations. Gardner Minshew, he's a low-end starter. He's played fairly well for Anthony Richardson. And then we also have Zach Wilson, who I do think has actually looked much better this year, but he's still definitely kind of that backup, low-end starter type that just really hasn't shown that he can be anything more than a game manager at absolute best. Then we have Tua. Tua is just such a hard evaluation because I do think he has a great play caller, much like Brock Purdy. He has great wide receivers, much like Brock Purdy, and it's a very similar system as well. He throws with such good anticipation and timing, rhythm, his ability to understand where to attack defenses, and just has the ultimate trust in his guy to throw with touch, to be able to throw the deep ball. He's definitely taken just huge strides, and he operates his system better than almost any quarterback in the NFL. I think it's a very quarterback-friendly system. I'm going to put him at the very top of this good starter tier. That puts him at number 10 in the NFL, which I think is a fair ranking for Tua. I think that he does so many things really well, but he just has a couple of boneheaded mistakes that just make you crazy every once in a while. It's like 1 to 2 times a week. It's just, why are you throwing that? It's because he's throwing with anticipation, and he has that ultimate trust in his guys. Most of the time it works so well, but sometimes it can be absolutely bone-crushing. And then we have Bryce Young. He's in the inconsistent tier right now. I had very high hopes for him. He just has nothing around him in Carolina. Frank Reich has been a disaster so far. Hopefully they can get that figured out. All the wide receivers besides Adam Thielen have been useless for the Panthers, and the offensive line has been really disappointing as well. So there's just very hard to evaluate what Bryce Young is at this point. You certainly love the traits and some of the high-end upside that he has, but definitely would have wished to be a little bit more consistent, shown a little bit more flashes up to this point, though I don't completely blame him by any means. Then Deshaun Watson, probably the most interesting conversation. I think the Browns have looked better at times without him in there. He is just not the same player that he was in Houston. Going to put him in the mediocre replacement level tier, and I really think that you can make the argument that this Browns team with Jacoby Brissett, who they had last year, would be a much better team. I think you would definitely have a better team with Baker Mayfield, who they traded away basically for nothing, and they got Deshaun Watson for a ridiculous amount of picks and the most guaranteed money in NFL history. And so this Browns team is so good. The defense is awesome. The offensive line is so good. The running backs, when healthy, are great. You've got playmakers, Amari Cooper and Njoku. Those guys are good, and I genuinely think that Deshaun Watson is holding this team back. They haven't looked significantly worse with P.J. Walker in there, and I think that's a testament to how poor Deshaun Watson has looked. I think he still has that talent. There are still just flashes every once in a while where you're like, this guy is a very talented player, but it's just not the same guy that we saw in Houston. And I definitely think that right now, Cleveland is going to have to figure out what they can get out of Watson moving forward. That's going to do it for my midseason quarterback tier list. Let me know your thoughts down below. Who do I have too high? Who do I have too low? Let me know where your favorite quarterback should land. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this kind of content, please hit that subscribe button down below. While you're down there, hit the like button as well. It would truly help me out. Thank you for watching. I will catch you in the next one.